Hello and welcome to the Federal. Today we have with us former India Test cricketer and a renowned coach, WV Raman, who has come out with his new book, The Lords of Wankhede, Tale Between Two Titles. The book is co-authored with senior cricket writer R Kaushik. Thanks, Raman, for joining, willing to talk to us.
It's my pleasure, and also thanks a lot to you for having me on the show.
Raman, let me come to you with the first question. Could you just tell us what made you write this book, The Tale of Two Titles, Lords of Wankhede? It talks about how the Indian cricket has transformed between the two titles, 1983 and 2011, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been involved with cricket for a long time, and of course, Kaushik has also been involved for more than 3 decades, and he's seen the marquee events. He's covered just about anything and everything. And one of those evenings when we are just having a chat, something about writing a book came up, and Kaushik was very keen that we do a book together. So we kind of, in an offhand manner, discussed the likely topics that we could perhaps pursue. Because if you look at cricket and cricket books in India that have been written by Indians, um, it's a plethora of books, and just about anything and everything might have been covered in all the books that have been published. So we hit upon this idea of writing about the significant events that happened between two World Cup titles, because the logic was that it was a long wait for the fans, for the players, and
Right.
everybody else. 83 to 2011 was definitely a long wait, and we felt that a lot of things happened then, which perhaps culminated in India becoming a major force as a cricket team and also as an establishment, the BCCI as an establishment. So we felt that was something that we could pursue. It was felt that could be an exciting project, and that's how it all started.
Right. And this book has 28 chapters. Is it symbolic, the wait between the first World Cup title and the second one, 28-year wait?
Yeah, more or less, I think we felt that we needed to somehow restrict or perhaps settle for X number of chapters, because if you're talking about a 28 period and if you're talking Indian cricket, there's a lot of things that happened. And quite obviously, we needed to try and draw a line somewhere or try and make it rather symbolic in some sort of way. And we felt that when we discussed the various things that happened, the list was really piling on. So it was not going to be easy to try and restrict or crunch too many events in one chapter. So we felt that we'll perhaps engage in a filtering process, and then we hit upon the fact that we'll settle for 28, wherein the first will be the 83 World Cup, the last one will be the 2011, and all that had happened in between, and which had a significant impact, be it performances or be it events that had a significant impact on Indian cricket. Again, once again, it's a matter of opinion. We felt that these 28 things needed to be written in the 28 chapters. The others could perhaps drop a entirely whole lot of events in their list. There's no hard and fast rule as to what can be considered as impactful and what cannot be. As far as we both were concerned, I thought we perhaps covered just about what we felt as the kind of events that would have made a lot of impact and made a lot of impact according to us. And that's how we ended up with that 28 chapters, as you rightly picked out.
When we look at the book, there are chapters on the emergence of Sachin Tendulkar, MS Dhoni, Rahul Dravid, Lakshman's historic partnership, then 1985 World Championship, then 2007 T20 World T20 title. So, and there's also a chapter on match fixing. If I could ask, like, how sensitive was it? How tough was it to deal with this subject? Because it has rocked world cricket earlier, and how tough was it to write on this subject?
There's a lot of reluctance as far as both of us are concerned. Even though Kaushik has been a hardcore professional as a sports writer and cricket writer primarily, he was also very sympathetic to the fact that this is something that we need not perhaps really get into. but you cannot avoid a few things in life. It is something that happened, and if you're writing about events that happened in a time frame between 83 to 2011, this was obviously one of the significant things, not because of what it was or how murky it was, how allegedly terrible it was for Indian cricket, or how allegedly some were culpable. It was more about what happened to Indian cricket post this particular episode, which has a lot of importance to Indian cricket, because Saurav Ganguly was handed over the responsibility of leading the
Right,
side.
right.
And we know the kind of remarkable twist that took place as far as the way Indian cricket changed, the way Indian cricket was looked at, and how things happened post that particular sordid event. And hence, it was almost a compulsion on our part to write. And we had to obviously uh, go ahead with it, even though we are not really for it, for the simple reason that we can't really say that everything was hunky dory. There was this thing, you cannot escape the beast at times. You have to bite the bullet, and this is one of those occasions.
And Raman, you also talk about the NCA coming up, National Cricket Academy in Bangalore. What role has the NCA played to see to it that the future generation of cricketers, what we are seeing now, has played a role, NCA's role?
NCA has gone through various things in its particular existence over a period of 1.5 decades or 2.5 decades now, almost. Where time flies, because when I got into 1.5 decades, you see how quickly time has flown. But NCA has gone through a lot of things in every which way. It started off with a bang. It started with a lot of fanfare, and it was also seen as something that was the only body that is going to churn out players, but it didn't turn out to be that way. Then it lost its way somewhere down the line. Then it was unfortunately and unkindly seen as more of a rehab center, which is not the fact. But the long and short of it is that in the last 8 years or 7 to 8 years, since the time it was resumed, because there was a phase when NCA was shut down as far as operations were concerned, as far as cricketing activities are concerned. And then it obviously had to step out. The BCs had to somehow get out of itself and see it in a very, very detached manner and see what could be done. And when they resumed in 2016, I think that's when I was involved in it for a couple of years. And we came with a fresh set of, myself, Irvani, came with a fresh set of perceptions, and we were more practicality oriented, and did things which would help the boys make the most of the facilities and the programs that were devised at the NCA. And after that, obviously, Rahul Dravid came into the setup, and it was a lot more easier for him, because one, because of his stature, two, because of the fact that he was involved in just about everything, unlike perhaps me or people before me. He was not only handling the side, he was also handling the programs behind the scene for the welfare of the sites that he was handling. So that obviously means that a man who's given in charge of everything that is there to be handled as far as junior cricket or the level before the Indian team is concerned, then you would have a holistic approach happening. Not that it did not happen during our time, but it's just that it's a lot more easier, because even when we were a part of the NCA, it was relatively easier, because it was Rahul Dravid who was the coach of the 19 and the A sides. And it was a natural progression rather for him when he became the head of cricket. And then, of course, VVS Lakshman is always one who sees the brighter side of things, who's always positive, and who's a very approachable guy. And the important thing about VVS is that he's open to ideas, and he'll make a genuine effort of considering the suggestions and seeing how it pans out. And I'm sure that under VVS, it'll only go on the up and up, and it has gone on the up and up. We see a lot more things happening rather smoothly. The fact that both of them have spent a lot of time together on and off the middle, it also helps Dravid and Lakshman, I mean. And that way, it is a lot more smoother. And it's also a case of a legend figuring in the NCA, which is extremely helpful for the simple reason their request or their suggestions will not be ignored or
Right.
overlooked. Otherwise, there's every chance that the request and the suggestions might somehow get missed out in the system. But when you have a Dravid, when you have a Lakshman, people don't really sort of overlook. You don't overlook things.
Right. Right. Raman, anyway, we know that the 1983 was a historic moment, watershed moment in Indian cricket history. What do you think when we had to wait for 28 years? And in 1983, of course, it changed, and a lot of people, even Sachin, has acknowledged that because of that triumph, he picked up the cricket bat and wanted to become an Indian cricketer. What do you think? Like in 28 years, why India could not win any other title? There were moments like they reached the semi-final, but what went wrong? Do you think? Why the wait for 28 years?
In a knockout phase, anything can happen, whichever format it is, whether it's a T20 format, or whether it's a 50 over format, or whether it's even a 5-day test match. If it's just one test match that's going to decide the winner of a title, then anything can go wrong. One bad innings in a test match can seal your hopes. So there's no saying what can happen, what can transpire in a knockout phase, and that's exactly what I mean. Look at, let's take it year by year. If you take in '87, we lost a game which is almost in the bag. And that is something that you will not even believe, even today, if you say more or less the same side which won the 83, 85 titles was playing in 87. And they lost two games when they needed to get 40 of 8 overs with 5 wickets remaining. They were bad losses. And how do you even reason it out? You don't reason it out. It's just a question of one particular phase where things did not go the way it should have, and that's why we lost. And semi-final loss was obviously very disappointing in '87. That was a side that should have won, and that happened at home as well. But again, at that time, uh, the pressures were different, the philosophies were different, the policies were different. Otherwise, look at it. A captain wins you the World Cup in '83. Within a couple of years, you have a different captain leading in '85. So you can get a measure of how things could change at the drop of a hat then, in terms of perceptions, in terms of policies, in terms of decisions. So the pressure factor might have been different. The outlook was different then. But here now you have people generally saying, let's take the positives and move on, even if you're bowled out for a very paltry score or if you lost a game very badly. That's good. That's nothing to really criticize about. But perceptions is what I'm talking about. Things have changed. The outlook has changed. And if you look at '92, we were never in it. '96, of course, semi-final again. Whatever could have been done differently is something that we'll keep on talking. There's no use about talking that particular sequence of events that panned out at the Eden Gardens. And then if you're talking about '99 again, we were never in it. I don't think we were in it. 2003 we played the finals. 2007, yes,
One
that
of
was a
the
disaster waiting
most
to happen.
forgettable World
Sorry,
Cups.
I'm sorry, that was a disaster waiting to happen for various reasons. It's not the fault of the players who played or who are part of the team. A lot of things that happened prior to the World Cup was obviously something that was really brewing that disaster. And it happened without anybody having to do anything seriously wrong in that World Cup. So that was something that everybody would like to forget, unfortunately. 2011 we won, and then of course 15 and 19 we were in the knockout phase, and one particular period of half an hour in both the games did not help us. So these things happen in a knockout, and the fact remains that we were considered a very serious contender in all these years. If at all that's any solace, we had that. And we had a lot of terrific cricketers in all those campaigns. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And it's good that from where we were in 83 or perhaps 79 to reach where we have now is obviously is what we were trying to book. Kaushik and I were trying to portray in that book. And it's remarkable the strides that India has made, both on and off the field.
Your book tracks about the journey of the 28 years. If you could pick personally, you and Kaushik, which was the best phase? Was there a best phase for Indian cricket during that time, 28 years, between 83 and 2011? Was there a best phase where we saw the emergence of maybe Sachin Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid, Ganguly, and the Dhoni in the later half in 2000s? What
For
was the best
India
phase
to
you would say?
Yeah, for India to retain its bearings in cricket, I think it was the 80s. Because if you look at the lack of facilities, lack of money, and the fact that you would get to play an odd test series here and there, and then players having to perform in that particular test series that they play in a year or once in 1.5 years was terrific achievement. And if you look at the cricketers of those days in the 80s, having no insurance of any kind whatsoever, and they had to face people who would be at you at 100 miles an hour relentlessly. And in case you got injured, you are left to your own devices. So, that being the case, cricketers of that era playing the game, sustaining it, and bringing laurels to the country, I think, was perhaps the best phase. And in terms of the 90s, the arrival of these boys, um, Lakshman, Dravid, Srinath, and all these characters, what it did was that it created a pathway for them to take the reins on and say, yes, this is how Indian cricket is going to think. This is how it's going to play. And this is what we are going to be. And we are going to be the ambassadors that we are supposed to be and we have to be. And that kind of attitude, mentality came in, and that was terrific. I think that's exactly what I always maintain in terms of these Kumble, Srinaths, these Zahirs, Lakshmans, Dravids, Tendulkars, Sehwags. I always say that more than the contributions that they made on the field, the contribution that they made in terms of creating an atmosphere in the dressing room is bigger to me, because that is so important in a team sport. And they were terrific in consciously doing that. And of course, I can't obviously, not that I've forgotten Ganguly, I was going to bring him in later for the way he handled all these boys, because they were such talented guys. And the likes of Yuvraj, once again, made it very clear that Indian cricket, or the brand of cricket India would play, is going to be completely different from what people think of us. And then, of course, the IPL is brought in a different thing altogether. But obviously, I'm not going to talk about it because it's not a part of the book.
Yeah, it's going. You just mentioned about Saurav Ganguly. That phase, John Wright and Ganguly combination changed the way Indian cricket thought of playing overseas. Since after that, the overseas record changed, and we witnessed that historic Test series as well at home. And the India won abroad, started winning abroad also, including that famous Adelaide Test. Of course, we didn't win the series. He was last series in 2004. So how did that change Indian cricket, Ganguly and John Wright?
That changed because of the perceptions I was talking to you about some time
Right.
ago, and the way people thought and the way people took decisions. Now, from the 80s to the 90s to John Wright's time, John Wright slash Ganguly's time, the mentality was a lot more settled. There's a lot more security in terms of money, in terms of one's position in the team. If you had a couple of bad games, you won't be dropped. For the simple reason, John Wright was all about being consistent, not only on the field, but also off the field when it came to decision making. And that is exactly why there's a lot of stability if you look at it then. I think stability is perhaps the right word, not only in terms of how things happen, nor also in terms of how people thought, and also what dictated the decision making. So there's a lot of stability, and that's why things happen. It's not about them doing great things, it's of them doing the ordinary thing consistently well. That was the difference. Because greatness, you might find it kind of rather strange when you hear me say that greatness is not about doing extraordinary things. It's all about doing the simplest of things consistently without getting bored or without falling uh, to the temptation of trying different things for the sake of it. It's being very, very consistent, it's doing the mundane things regularly without getting bored, and doing it like almost just like a machine, which is what greatness is all about. For example, Sonny Gavaskar would bat straight and he would not try flamboyant shots for about 20 years, and that's why he was great. Whereas the others would try, fall kind of to the trap of having that exhilarating feeling of playing a flamboyant shot and hitting a boundary, but he didn't fall a victim to that temptation. So that's what greatness is all about, doing the simplest of things consistently over a long period of time.
Last few questions. Since we are in the midst of another 50 over World Cup, do you think there is always question hanging over the survival of 50 over format? Is this the last 50 over World Cup? What are your thoughts as a coach and as a former cricketer? And since your book talks about the era between period between two World Cup titles, do we see what 50 over cricket surviving in the era of T20 formats and so many T20 leagues around the world?
Yeah, the last part of the question will more or less give you the answer. I for one, would want the countries not to have all the formats when they play a bilateral. I would perhaps not have the T20, but then, of course, that's where the money is, as far as administrators are concerned. But once again, let's face it, people are not really making money out of gate collections these days. So, with all these kind of leagues happening across, there is enough and more of T20. So, we got to be a little bit more selective of the T20 fixtures when it comes to bilaterals. Because if you give all the three formats in a bilateral series, people are going to have options, and they'll obviously take either the extremes. When I say extremes, I'm talking about the T20 or the Test cricket, because one day is a little bit neither here nor there in terms of the spectator kind of expectations. But again, one day requires a different set of skills, which is also very important for you to evolve as a cricketer, to be considered as one of the greats. And what could perhaps be done with the 50 over format is to try and make it 40 overs, just one ball, or even break it into two innings, and try and say, at the start when the toss happens, yes, the skipper has the choice, and the second will be ulta, like the power play, like the super over you have. So try and get that going, and that is obviously going to make players do captains really having to think and do different things, as against the mid games being more or less at a similar pace as it is now. So these are the things that need to be considered. I'm sure that there is a place for the ODI format as well. Um, so we can perhaps look at saying uh, a good mix of the test T20 or test and ODIs. And if all the formats are there, it's going to be tough.
Right, Raman, one last question regarding your book. Which was the most satisfying part of your book, which you enjoyed? Any particular chapter or any particular phase during that 28 years? You mentioned earlier that 80s was the best phase for Indian cricket and 90s saw emergence of so many superstars. So, was there any one chapter or any one phase you enjoyed the most?
I think the entire thing was really exciting, and even more exciting was the race against time we had to get it released around the time the World Cup started. Because It was originally planned to happen that way, but for various reasons, you don't really factor in a few things, and there are certain things that happen which are unexpected. And there was a bit of a race as far as getting the book released before the World Cup, just purely for the reason that it would be relevant then. Uh, Post the World Cup, I don't know. Obviously the thing was that if the boys win, then it's going to be really put on the back burner because of the seemingly irrelevance that could creep in once the boys won the World Cup. So we had to get it going before the World Cup. I thought that race against time was really something which is exhilarating. It was irritating at times, and it was also, in the end, rather satisfying.
Thanks for your time, Raman. Hope we need not wait another 20 years. Hopefully, we get the third title on Sunday, November 19th in Ahmedabad.
Okay, hopefully, let's all wish for that, and I'm sure that the way these boys have gone on so far, we are being a little bit more realistic than hopeful, simply because of the kind of quality of cricket that they played.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.